Right here I have the dash cluster off my F-150. It's a 2008 F-150. I've taken this out several times. The first reason I took it out, the brake light that's over here was stuck on, and inevitably I let somebody borrow my truck, and that caused people to drive with the brake on, the parking brake on. So took that out, fixed that. These marks, these hash marks are here. Just there's another video of a guy who shows how to take off this whole part, and you use these hash marks to indicate when you put the levers back in there where the starting position is. And that's for these servo motors. They don't have keyways on them, they just kind of press on there, so that's what that is. There's a really good video on how to take this whole thing out, and I'm just going to talk about a couple of problems that I had with this. The main problem I had with my F-150, when I took this out and I did the soldering fix, like you can find other videos online, it fixed this, and I put it back together. I also had to change the bulb for the odometer. That was an easy fix. I put it back together, it worked fine, but then I started having the problem where my dome light kept turning on whenever I was driving. At first it wasn't that big of a deal, but it turned into a pretty big nuisance. On hunting trips and things like that, it would turn on, and it makes driving at night really hard, so I'd turn off all the interior lights, and then you know your dash cluster is pretty dim at that point. So then I started looking into it, and I noticed, like, if you hit the dashboard it would turn off, and then I started messing with this connector here. I took off the dash cover and I messed with this connector, and it wouldn't do much, and I'd mess with this connector and the dome lights would turn off and on and do all kinds of stuff. Other people say it's the dimmer switch. I took apart the dimmer switch entirely and I didn't find anything there. Everything seemed fine. It was pretty solid. So the next step was me taking this apart again, because there's a lot and you can see it inside this thing. So when you take this off, there's a couple of screws there. What is that, 7? And they're all holding these down. Here you can see all the resistors that you have here, and these are what everyone tells you to touch up to try to fix the brake light issue. I did that and it didn't solve it, so I had to go further, and that's when you start to take off the indicator arms, and that's to deal with the problem. So I'm going to pull this over and you can see it. So it's held on right here by these two. So let's see if I can get it. There we go. There we go. And so I might have messed something up, but we'll see. So anyway, so the main kind of area that you focus on with the brake light is these resistors here, this 821, that's a 820 ohm resistor, 751, these are all 750 ohm resistors. They're pretty big, they're long. So what you end up having is just the vibration and the hot and cold cycles. Basically your resistor and your board expand and contract at different rates, and that puts stress on the solder joint. And what you end up having eventually is a crack in the solder joint. And it's worse with these parts because they're big. It's not as big a problem with these small parts. So that's, if you look at all these parts, I touched up everything just because I was in here with a soldering iron. You don't need to do that. All you need to do to fix the brake light issue is come in here and all these big ones, kind of touch them up and add a little bit of solder. You don't need to add a lot, just a little bit. And once you add that solder to it, it works really well and it fixes that issue. So when I first did it, I focused on these guys right here. That's what the video said to focus on, the other guys online. But then I had that lamp turning on issue, and I came back in and I touched up all the big ones, all the 751s. And you can notice how big they are compared to all the other resistors. They're, I don't know, 1206s or something. Anyway, they're fairly large, and when I came in after the fact, I think this is the culprit. I think this guy is the reason that the lamp turns on and off. So I touched up that guy, and that fixed the issue. Well, that second time, but I touched a lot of them, but I'm fairly certain it was that guy because it was really, really bad. I also came in, there's another one on this side. You can see it right there. Then there's another one up here. And let's see. I don't see any other ones. Oh, these guys you don't really need to worry about as much because they have a huge flange on the end, and that guy allows for expansion and contraction. It's kind of like a lead. So you don't need to worry about these diodes. Those are fine. You just need to worry about the parts that have a body, really, and that's like these large resistors here. So I did that, I fixed that, and that was the issue. So if you're having that issue with the light turning on inside your F-150, dome light randomly turning on, turning off. You know, at one point I even had seen that it was the dimmer switch, and online people were saying that. So I was tapping around the dimmer switch and it would turn on and off. But really what's going on is, since this board is mounted to, you know, your dash kind of through a rigid connection, you tap it anywhere and it's going to make that piece vibrate, and that's going to kind of make it move around. And so just kind of tapping it anywhere at that point, like even around the radio, would make it turn on and off. Now, one more thing. I came in, and when I put on the indicators, these levers, when I put them back on, and a couple of them popped off. Let's see if you can see it. A couple of these are good, but the other ones are the ones that popped off in my case. These guys are the ones that pop off, so I'm going to just put some super glue on them to try to fix them. So anyway, I pushed them down all the way, and they actually were touching this guy, and I thought I needed new servos. So I did the fix where I took the servo motor out and I replaced it with a brand new servo motor. That's online also. And when I did that, I saw that my servo motor and all the gears were completely fine. So all that was happening was, since the indicator was pushed down all the way, it was hitting the face plate, and it was causing resistance. So sometimes it would cause it to skip. So I could go in and I could reset it and it would go back to 0, but eventually it would mess up again, and that was just because I had mounted those arms way too low. So that's when you put all this back together, that's something to watch out for. Another thing to watch out for that I had a problem with was my odometer. The light came on. I mean, you can see the light for the odometer is right there. It's not a big deal. But the light came on, but the odometer wouldn't turn on. And the reason is, it took me a little bit to figure it out, but you have these guys that the odometer kind of, if you look right here, the odometer display plugs into those guys. Sorry for it being shaky. So those guys plug into this, but I mean, you can see it moves around really willy-nilly, pretty easy. That whole piece moves. So if you're having problems, there's kind of an inspection port right here, and after you try to plug it in, you can look at it from the side and determine if it got plugged in or not, and that'll tell you, you know, if your odometer kind of display plugged in correctly. You can just look in from the side, and then you can tell without having to actually plug this thing in and see that it didn't plug in right. And if it doesn't line up, like mine didn't line up, and you saw how I pulled it off, I kind of pulled it off odd, that could kind of bend these. So what you would do then, the way I fixed it, because I had pulled it off weird another time, was you go in, I just went in with a butter knife and kind of pushed all of them really gently to one side, and then I got them to fit back inside that connector. So that's how you fix that. So so yeah, kind of recap, touch up all these guys with solder, all these big guys, all of them kind of across the board, that guy there, and then that should fix the lamp problem as well as the brake light problem. These guys, if they're kind of messing up on you, and there's a video on that also, so I don't need to explain that. But then when you put it back together, if you're having problems with your odometer no longer coming on, it very well could be that. Now there's a circuit, I think it's that. Yeah, it's this transistor, it's a PNP, and these resistors right here, and that BJT, and that's what turns on the display. So if it's plugged in and it's still not coming on, it very well could be that. And then from there, that comes straight from this microcontroller, is what turns that on. So you just have to go in and troubleshoot that, make sure you don't have a something burned up or whatever. But it's all pretty simple. It's not too complicated. Anyway, take care.